I think you know what a quote. We're being recorded. That's awesome. I think you know what a quarter is. You may not know what Calumet is. And this is that part of the Chicago region that extends just south of Hyde Park and around the southern end of Lake Michigan. And I happen to be a geographer. I work in the region alongside folks like Allison and Ray, and we think together about this pretty amazing place. And as a geographer, I'm going to walk you through a couple of quick maps to locate us, and also to introduce a little bit of the content of my course, and I think Allison's as well. So Carla, let's go to the next one. So first of all, you ask people, where is the Calumet region? Well, one of the things you could do is ask them. This is just a map of where people say, it's over here. Here's where we call things the Calumet region. As you can see, it's kind of clustered up on the state line. Next one, Carlo. Now, some other people will say, oh, that's that place when you're driving to the east on the Chicago Skyway, you go up real high and you see like, whoa, there's a lot of industry here and there's like plumes of stuff. True. This is actually a map of made land. This is land that is been landfilled or dredged, or in other words, filled in. That's part of the Calumet region. Next one, please. This is a map of Superfund sites and toxic release inventory releasing sites, which tells you not only that it is a very industrial place where lots of steel is made and oil is refined, but also where the legacy of industries is a big part of the landscape. Is that all it is? Next one. Well, it's a place where much has been done to transform the land, to fill in low spots, to cut down high spots, and to actually rearrange river systems. The watershed system, as you can see here, these two lines on this map say, hey, the historic watershed was here, and now it's way over there. Next one, please. Now, people have studied this place for a very long time, and I'm just overlaying a historic map of the Potawatomi, and there's been a lot of really good conversation with Native groups today about the region. But people have looked at this as a region, as a place that kind of coheres within the overall Chicago region. They've done this for almost 100 years now. And the white boundary here is part of something called the Calumet Heritage Area, which will be a focus of something that I'll be talking about this term. Next one, please. And as a matter of fact, hiding in the midst of these smokestacks are like critically imperiled global important resources. I'm going to dwell on this slide for just a second and ask Allison if she'd like to maybe comment on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Mark is a geographer. I'm trained as an ecologist. I'm Allison Anastasio. Nice to see you. I teach in environmental and urban studies. I teach an ecology class in the quarter. And one of the things that's really truly amazing and fascinating is the amount of diversity in animals and plants, as well as habitats that are in this region. So if you think of the Calumet region as, this bottom part of Lake Michigan, it's really an interesting collision kind of three major biomes. So if we think about 10,000 years ago or so, there was a little bit of ice on top of, like a glacier on top of Lake Michigan. And as that receded, it revealed some of these habitats. So the Calumet is often characterized with a lot of wetlands, and actually wetlands are going to be a focus of the class I'm teaching this year. Which I'll get to in a moment. So we have the northern boreal biome. So where so sort of like southern and mid Canada, we're at the southern end of that. We have the eastern deciduous forest from the east. and we have the tall grass prairie in the west. And all three of these come together at this sort of pinnacle of Lake Michigan. And so we see this immense amount of biodiversity. So you see things that are special to, for instance, the boreal forest next to, for instance, I like to use the example of bearberry, which is the Arctic bearberry. Okay, Arctic bearberry. Here it is in Chicago, but it inhabits the same ecosystems, a dune ecosystem, that the native prickly pear cactus does. Right, and so there are these incredible juxtapositions of organisms in a particular habitat, as well as this really incredible heterogeneous matrix of different kinds of habitats, which is made even more interesting when you consider, as Mark introduced, the industrial habitat, the industrial land use and the legacy of that. So while we might think about industry as we might think about industry in a certain way, in a particular way. One way we might not think about that is some of these industries took up huge amounts of land and didn't use it all. And that's very curiously where we find some of these really special habitats. Maybe it's between some railroad tracks. Maybe it's in the corner of the property of a steel mill. And you can see these critically imperiled and globally imperiled habitats, especially like the red triangles in Northwest Indiana, right? That's all highly industrial. And so these parts of the Calumet region facilitate the organisms, right? Plants and animals and fungi and bacteria and all kinds of stuff, as well as habitats, both habitats that were here, 500 years ago, as well as the habitats that have been created by humans that are now sort of interstitially between some of these remnant habitats. So that's a really, to me, in addition to the sort of diversity of people and cultural heritage that's in the region, the biological diversity is really exciting. And so I'm just gonna keep going and tell a little bit about my class on this one. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. So generally we'll learn about urban ecology, but the sort of specific focus for this year is about wetlands. And wetlands beyond just what we might think of as a sort of biological entity of wetlands, but how wetlands have been used, how they've been abused, how they've been removed, how they've been restored, how they have been constructed. Oh yeah, that's what we'll do. And so really focusing on how wetlands characterize this region, are important through history in this region, and then also are important right now. Like, wetlands are such an important thing. They perform a lot of ecosystem services, for instance, that we manufacture wetlands, right? In the sense that we have retention ponds, we have permeable pavements, we use these qualities of wetlands in our built environment. And so that's something that we will look at throughout the quarter. And then also we'll take field trips. Here you can see some students at Big Marsh several years ago. And it is really interesting to look at how this place has changed. Big Marsh is a Chicago Park District park that is about 115th and Stony Island, basically. So it's right down south near Lake Calumet. And at this point, you can see all these stubby things in the photo. Those used to be extremely tall reeds that were taller than us, and a very invasive species. And this was shortly after there was a controlled burn at this site, and it revealed, I had been to this place before and literally never seen it because all of the Phragmites was in the way. So we'll also talk about this pernicious weed, Phragmites, as well in class, because it does play a big role in wetlands in the area. Okay, that's my quick and dirty.
So a few more slides and piggyback on what Allison just said. First of all, the fact that a number of these places like Big Marsh, which is amazing, this was slated to have become yet another in a series of sanitary landfills in Chicago, which look on the landscape like Teotihuacan or some ancient civilization, but they're packed with diapers and they're pretty tall. But that didn't happen. It was saved and it was transformed into this amazing place that Allison just described. And there's a part of this that's a part of the story of Chicago in general, and I would say of places like this in general, and that is how was this kind of planned out for people and for nature? This region, the Chicago region and the Calumet region within it, the nation's first National Park Service director, a Chicagoan, very committed to the preservation of the Indiana Dunes, which is that big blob of gold on this map. It goes back to 1916. I happen to be, that's what you're looking at right behind me. This is a national park within sight of Hyde Park. On the far south side, just near Big Marsh, is another brand new national monument called Pullman National Monument. From one national monument to another national park and the landscape in between, the stories of the region are told, and land has been protected. Some amazing conservation work is happening right now in the midst of, as Allison said, between the rails, by the side of the road, in the shadow of the factory. Next one, please. What this dot map shows you are a number of the resources, natural resources, cultural resources, community resources that have been identified through a process to create something called a national heritage area. And that's that bigger, broader boundary here. The course that I'm going to be involved with is called Planning for Land and Life in the Calumet region. And we'll use this as the framing device for the course. How national heritage areas are the latest in a series of planning mechanisms by which very diverse places like this one can have their story told, a light shown upon their cultural and natural resources, and elevate these amazing stories that cross into, and I think I'm going to hand it off to Ray here in just a second, issues about environmental justice in the context of this industry and nature matrix of workers' fight for justice and of community voices that are being elevated. And again, best way to get at this is to get out there and see it, and I'm looking forward to that. So let me hand it off to Ray. I think I got maybe one or two more slides, but go ahead, Ray.
Okay. Hi, I'm a first timer in the terms of the Calumet, so I'm really looking forward to learning as well as teaching this time and learning more about the Calumet itself. I'm looking forward to learning what Mark and Allison know. Most of my courses deal with the laws that deal with things like plumes of stuff, like Mark was saying. So how to regulate plumes of stuff and toxic waste sites and things like that. So I bring that to this as well as the idea that this course has two parts of it. The first part was really focusing on what environmental justice is and examples of it and studies in the field. And if you haven't taken that part of the course, that's fine. We'll go over it kind of briefly the first day. But really what we're going to be doing is doing a research project in the area that helps a community organization dealing with an environmental justice issue. So the goals of the course are really twofold. One is to learn research methods. We're going to learn how to do key informant interviews, how to do a literature review, how to do a general population survey. And you're also going to end up doing, you're going to end up writing the general population survey. So it'll give you some idea of thinking about what goes into that kind of thing, what goes into the questions you want to ask. If you ask one question and it leads something else, leads somewhere else, where does it lead to? And what's the best thing to ask? And all the other questions that go with it in terms of confidentiality, in terms of what's an appropriate question to ask, question wording, all of those are really important skills to learn. Back in the prehistoric ages, I had a long period of time where I was in survey research and I ran large scale data collection projects. So I bring a little bit of that experience to this, but it's also the opportunity to meet with people in the community. I mean, we're not going to do this in an antiseptic way or in a way that takes us away from the community, but really to be part of the community, to be somebody that the community feels comfortable dealing with, telling their story and getting valuable information from the work that we do. So my goal would be that we do some really interesting key informant interview with community leaders, and they give us some idea of what the community is all about, what the environmental justice issues are, and then we do a general population survey that we've created that gives people the chance to speak about what issues are important to them. We've done these kinds of studies in the past, not in the Calumet. We've done them for other projects. We found out some really interesting things. One time we did a study of the south end of the Chicago River, both the south side and the south suburbs. And we figured that people would want, we came in with the idea that people were going to want pretty much the amenities that were popping up on the north end of the Chicago River. That was the kind of thing that people wanted. But there was a lot more hesitation when we did our study. There was a lot more hesitation because the idea that that kind of change in the Chicago River on the south side would lead to gentrification and would take people out of the community. So we found that and reported that in terms of a finding of our study, and was useful information for the groups that we were working with. So the idea is that we're going to learn these research methods, but we're also going to use them in the service of the Calumet in terms of finding how we can further environmental justice, how we can overcome this legacy of environmental injustice that has plagued the region for a long time. One of the leading national environmental justice groups, People for Community Recovery, is actually located in the Calumet, and they go back to the early 80s at least. We've had the director of it, Cheryl Johnson, speak at our class previously, so that may be a community partner that we work with. We haven't exactly chosen the project that we're going to work on, but we will have it in place by the time the course begins, and then we'll have a really vigorous 9 weeks to get our project together, which I'm really looking forward to.
Great, thanks, Ray. So now that we've heard about the courses, I'm just going to dive into some of the requirements just broadly. So in order to participate in the Calumet Quarter, you will need to have above a 3.0 GPA and complete the Calumet Quarter application. The application can be found on the Calumet Quarter webpage that we shared earlier. The application is really short and includes essentially your name, major, year you plan to graduate, and a short 500-word essay. This essay is pretty simple. It just answers what you hope to learn in studying the Calumet region and how you hope to make use of what you learn in shaping your future academic and professional pursuits. As we've said before, this is an immersive quarter, so participating students are required to take all 3 Calumet Quarter courses together and are discouraged from taking additional ENST courses simultaneously. The intention of this, like Sabina said, is like a study abroad at home, so the quarter forms the entirety of each participant's ENST coursework for that quarter. And as we said, the Calumet Quarter focuses a lot around in-person experiences. So there's field trips every single Friday. So participating students will be required to attend day-long 9:30 to 4:20 p.m. field trips every Friday. So with all of that information that we just threw at you guys over the past half hour, I wanted to open the second half of the session open to any questions. concerns, anything you want to talk about or ask about. So I open the floor to Q&A. Sure.
So you mentioned that we can't take additional ENST courses, but can we take any general course along with these three courses in the Calumet quarter?
I guess I would pass it up to you, Chris, for essentially you're asking if you want to take these three courses and another course that's not environmental and urban studies, basically, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so the short answer to that is absolutely you can. You just have to manage your time correctly, right? So we've structured these courses so that they're all pretty much meeting in the afternoons, Monday through Thursday. And then, of course, there's the Friday commitment with the field trips, which you certainly don't want to miss. And so any other class that you would take would have to fit in usually into those like morning to midday hours, Monday through Thursday, or be a later evening course. And of course, we have more and more evening offerings now with kind of pandemic scheduling. So as long as you don't have a conflict with the classes, that's absolutely not a problem. Again, though, just be mindful of particularly the Friday commitments. That would be the quarter doesn't really work without the opportunity to be in the field, as several of the instructors have said. So you want to make sure that your scheduling works out. I would also say, as sort of the general advisor warning about not overcommitting yourself on any quarter, these 9-week quarters move really, really, really fast and folks are busy. So just be mindful of your own mental health and what you're able to take on and what you're going to want to take on when you've got the opportunity to do something that's pretty immersive and pretty all-encompassing. But we've had many students take a fourth class in conjunction with various quarters, including the Calumet quarter over the years.
Right, thank you.
Sure. And Sophia?
So I guess kind of building off that, so it seems like obviously the quarter is very immersive, but what kind of like work out like beyond the field trips and stuff kind of like do the classes require?
And I'll sort of pass that off to the instructors to answer.
Well, I think Ray gave you a bit of a sketch of his course, and he'd be welcome to say more. I would say that the work in the planning for land and life will be around thinking about this particular region, where we'll be thinking about it as a heritage area. I would like you to set up a comparison with a place you know very well, and how you would think of it as a place filled with assets of natural and cultural that are open to some kind of whether there's a current effort there or one that you would advocate for. And so I would like you to touch base with where, a place you know well, whether you are rooted there or it's a place you'd like to know about. And that's a little bit of course, some background research, and we'll be doing some discussion papers and some thinking together about things. I would like you to I have to work this up in the current context, but to be thinking about perhaps preparing your own set of resources about a particular special place, like a website that you would perhaps design and create something that parallels what you see in Calumet. So that's currently how I'm thinking about it. I have to work on the particulars of that, but that's my basic thought. I think the participation and the discussion is the core of things, and we'll build off from there. And so I should hand it off to Ray.
Yeah, I think that's, we're not talking about, something that's really heavy in terms of outside reading, if that's what you're asking about. A lot of the work's going to be done in the class. A lot of the work's going to be done in groups and putting together the instruments that we're going to be using for this, learning more about the region. Obviously, the field trips will really help with that. So once we have a better sense of the region, and once we have a better sense of what our methods are, I think they're going to flow together really, really well. So I think that's what we're looking at here.
And one of the things I think Allison would probably say, were she here, and Chris and Sabina, you correct me on this one, but some of those Friday experiences are actual data collection experiences. So that's structured into the timing of the course.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Allison very frequently sneaks. Allison is, in addition to her work on campus, she's also an environmental steward for Rainbow Beach. And is there any place else that she's also doing that for? She's very deep connections with the park district throughout the region. And so Allison almost always figures out a way to sneak people in to work on a project that she's actively working on in the community herself, kind of a parallel to what Ray does. Allison is also a big proponent of, and some of you may have taken her class on what she calls the Great Nearby. So really taking some of these framings that we use sometimes to study places like the Great Barrier Reef and thinking instead about a place that is very close to home. She often will assign students like ecological observation assignments, for example. And once upon a time, she printed these amazing buttons that were like, don't bother me, I'm watching a tree, or something like that. They were really cool. They were like the size of dinner plates, and you would wear them while you were watching a tree for hours at a time. But so she's got some really, really cool methodological things that I think are going to align really nicely with the way that Mark teaches his course, with that focus on a place that you know well, and the way that Ray teaches his course with this kind of community-based participatory research design. In case this was the secret agenda of your question, I should add that the courses in the Calumet quarter are standard University of Chicago classes. So don't think that just because you get to go to Cowles Bog that you don't have to read about it. And on the flip side, I would say everybody knows that it's spring and that this is an immersive quarter. Don't think that you're going to be so incredibly slammed with these three classes that your brain will explode. Students who have done the quarter have over the years have definitely commented that they find it a pretty refreshing way to wrap up a year and a great fit for spring quarter, because it does have these interactive things that are not quite just sitting in a classroom all the time. But on the other hand, it's a really neat chance to bring kind of praxis and theory into dialogue with one another. At least that's what we aim for.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, Chris, that I and I think all of us will Ray specifically mentioned this, but I would also have a fair number of guests of practitioners in the region. You know, I've had the superintendent of the Indiana Dunes National Park. The heritage area movement has made some major advances in the last year or two on its diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I've got a good relationship with the director of the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. So we have the opportunity to bring some folks, whether virtually or in person here, and some of these conservation leaders who, some of whom happen to be the same community residents who are leading environmental justice issues. So we got lots of opportunity to cross this, and those are parts of the conversations that I meant about before, being actively participating when you've got those guys in the room with you.
And Mark, I know you kind of alluded to this in the chat, but just in case folks don't know, who are you and what's your day job? And what's your connection to the Calumet region and this heritage area you keep talking about?
Sure. So I work at the Field Museum of Natural History. We have a Keller Science Action Center, and that is, so the Field Museum of Natural History has 40 million objects and specimens of the record of life on Earth and before Earth. Actually, there's some meteorite material that goes back to 6 billion years ago. But our job is to take that knowledge and to bring it forward into the world outside the walls of the museum for biodiversity and for cultural understanding. And I direct our Chicago region program. So I'm a really close ally of the Chicago Studies program and of the program on global environment. And we've chosen, really, as part of our museum focus, to work in the Calumet region because Allison didn't say this, but the Indiana Dunes National Park, of 450 some National Park Service units, is the 7th most biodiverse of all of them, species richness. And it's in the middle of it is the last integrated steel mill constructed in the United States. That juxtaposition, which was there from the birth of that park, is in some ways a place like the Field Museum of Natural History should seek to understand what is this civilization we've wrought here, where we've got nature and culture side by side in uneasy juxtaposition with each other. And so anyway, that's my gig. We work a lot on this Calumet Heritage Area project. So I'm very involved with that. I know lots of folks in the region working on it, and I would like to open you up into seeing how partner efforts like that work. I see Raghav has his hand up as well. So.
Yeah, I just have a small question. So I was just looking at the Calumet Quarter webpage as well. So one thing that I noticed was that the Environmental Justice Clause and Planning for Land and Life Clause, both of them are for 2 hours 50 minutes, right? But Professor Anastasio's clause, that is for 3 hours 50 minutes. Is that right? Or even if it is, why is Professor Anastasio's clause longer? I was just wondering, why is it for 3 hours 50 minutes? It was just a question that I had.
So this is just an artifact of the canonical hours and the days that the classes are on. So we had to put together 2 courses to make a longer block. And on one day of the week, I believe Allison's is on Tuesday, is that correct?
Wednesdays.
Yeah, that day the canonical hours just have a different length. So it looks like her course is longer, but I think you could expect it to be the same amount of time that you would spend in the other 2 courses.
Perfect. And a follow-up question to that was that will we be expected to also go on a field trip on any of these days, like except Friday? Would we be going to the Calumet region on a Wednesday or Tuesday too, or is it just Friday? Every Friday.
So occasionally instructors have tried, especially if they have a longer block on a particular day, to fit a short excursion. Usually that's going to be a much more local excursion. So for example, Dr. Anastasio works very closely with the folks who maintain the trees on campus. I don't know if you know, but the University of Chicago campus is actually an arboretum. It's designated because of the number of rare species of trees that were brought by historic biology departments over the years and planted around campus. And Dr. Anastasio does a lot of work with the folks who maintain all of that biodiversity on our campus. And so she'll frequently incorporate, for example, going out and doing things on our campus as part of her class time. But anything that happens during the outside of Fridays will be contained within the times that are assigned to the class. So you can schedule with confidence if you're thinking still about what that 4th class might look like and when it might fit into your day. The only kind of long block field trips are going to be the ones that fit into the Friday period.
All right, thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions or things you want to add or anything like that before we close up?
I just might add one thing about the registration process is that this goes, I think Tess already sort of alluded to this, but you'll submit the application that Tess mentioned by February 7th, and then you'll find out if you're accepted and then be batch enrolled in the courses. So you don't have to go through pre-registration for these courses. And we will let you know before pre-registration so that you don't have to wonder about that. If you're doing any additional gen ed courses, then you would do that through the normal pre-registration process.
I should also mention, if anybody is in fact still completing core sequences in particular, the registrar does frequently assume that you are going to continue in a sequence at the same time. And so if, say, you did Calculus 1 and Fall Calculus 2, and now you're taking there is a 3rd course in that sequence, the registrar will not be able to pre-register you for the Calumet quarter if you have a conflict because of a sequence that you had been taking. So that's something that we'll try to flag in advance of pre-registrations, but just to be aware of that, that might be something to take note of. We'll ask you about that when we communicate acceptance into the quarter, the goal being that we don't have any registration conflicts, but that's something that you would need to be thinking about, is if you have a sequence that would sort of naturally assume that you would be taking the third part of it during the time that you have the Calumet, even if you're perfectly capable of changing sequences or shifting around your schedule. So just something to mention that has come up in the past with students doing that pre-registration.
And then to answer your question in the chat about how many students are in the Calumet quarter, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or Sabina, but I believe it's usually between 10 and 15.
We've had as many as 21 in a Chicago Studies quarter. I don't think the Calumet quarter has ever been that large. I could be wrong though. I think we've discovered that, you know, that kind of, that there's a real sweet spot in kind of like the 12 to 15 range, that brings just enough diversity in the student population, different majors and so on, that really enriches the conversation, but it also allows us to fit everybody in a van, which sometimes is kind of helpful when we're getting around the region. It's not necessarily the most transit rich region of the city.
Great. So I hope that we were able to answer all of your questions. If not, you're always free to always welcome to email me at tconway@uchicago.edu or any of the professors that added their emails to this chat. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we see you in the quarter this spring. And yeah, have a great weekend.
Thank you.